Tonight's Fact or Fiction is brought to you by America's Finest Carpet.
In tonight's Fact or Fiction, we're looking into a story that seems hard to believe. It claims the horror movie Late Night with the Devil made $666,666 at the box office yesterday. And that is apparently true. According to Variety, the independent film finished 6th at the box office over the weekend, earning a total of $2.8 million, and that includes $666,666 yesterday. 666 is, of course, the symbol of the devil in modern popular culture. Fortunately, if you're looking to ward off evil spirits, the #1 movie over the weekend was Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire. If you would like to submit a question to us, just go to 10news.com, click on Fact or Fiction. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure having you. Congratulations on your new podcast on the Bill Maher Network.
Thank you.
I'm sure it will be wonderful. Am I crazy to think the world is falling apart, and should we blame Biden?
If you're crazy, then I'm crazy too.
Okay.
Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I don't want to be right on this, but it's just called reality at this point. And maybe it's an age thing as well. I've been around too long, and you just see how it used to be. At the end of the day, yeah, you look, and I have 2 kids in college right now. My daughter called me. She's like, Mom, hold on tight. This might be the end. When you look at all of the things that are happening and kind of the why behind them, and to me, it's not just like coincidence. There's like darkness, evil
weird
involved
stuff
in a lot of this. I mean, and I don't like it, but that's where we are. So what do we do to fix it?
I actually built a panic room inside my panic room. And inside that one, oatmeal.
But tonight isn't just about the people in front of the camera. In this room are some of the most important TV and film executives in the world. People from every background, but they all have one thing in common. They're all terrified of Ronan Farrow.
Ronan Farrow's explosive reporting on Harvey Weinstein's alleged sexual abuse of women helped to launch the Me Too movement in 2017, winning him and other reporters a Pulitzer Prize the year after.
He's coming for you. He's coming for you. Look, talking of all you perverts, it was a big year. It was a big year for paedophile movies. Surviving R. Kelly, Leaving Neverland, 2 Popes. Shut up. I don't care. No one cares about movies anymore. No one goes to the cinema. No one really watches network TV. Everyone's watching Netflix. This show should just be me coming out going, well done, Netflix, you win everything. Good night. But no, we got to drag it out for 3 hours. You could binge watch the entire first season of Afterlife instead of watching this show. That's a show about a man who wants to kill himself because his wife dies of cancer. And it's still more fun than this, okay? Spoiler alert, season 2 is on the way, so in the end, he obviously didn't kill himself. Just like Jeffrey Epstein. Shut up. I know he's your friend, but I don't care. You had to make your own way here in your own plane, didn't you?
We found Diddy. The disgraced billionaire hip-hop mogul and Democrat Party community organizer was spotted for the first time since having his homes raided in a major sex trafficking investigation, similar to Jeffrey Epstein's, they say.
World-renowned Dallas pastor T.D. Jakes is named in a federal lawsuit against musician Sean Diddy Combs.
It's filed by a producer that worked with Combs. It discusses how the singer planned to leverage his relationship with the bishop.
They want to know who was in and out of Diddy's planes and his homes. As Lil Rod's lawsuit alleges, they weren't just up-and-coming artists. These were celebrities, politicians, athletes, international dignitaries, and music label executives, all captured on camera in Diddy's compounds.
There are some people who believe that they are, when they reach a certain level, invincible.
Mark Hawkins, a professor at LA Film School, also known as DJ Clientele, from World Class Wrecking Crew, a group that helped shape hip-hop.
There are certain things that I've seen in the business that would make me turn away.
The world got to see James Corden as a fat pussy. He was also in the movie Cats, but no one saw that. And the reviews, oh, shocking. I saw one that said, this is the worst thing to happen to cats since dogs, right? But Dame Judi Dench defended the film, saying it was the role she was born to play, because she... I can't do this next joke. Because she loves nothing better than plonking herself down on the carpet, lifting her leg and licking... Verbal. She's old school. It's the last time, who cares?
Chapter 18. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. How much she hath glorified herself, and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death, and mourning, and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth, who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament for her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more.
Hello. My name is Montague William III. And what I will tell you may well sound absurd, but the less who believe it, the better for me. For you see, I'm in banking and big industry. For many a year we have controlled your lives, while you all just struggle and suffer in strife. We created the things that you don't really need, your sports cars and fashions and plasma TVs. I remember it clearly how all this begun. family secrets from father to son, inherited knowledge that gives me the edge, while you people lie sleeping at night in your beds. We control the money that controls your lives. Whilst you worship false idols and wouldn't think twice about selling your souls for a place in the sun, these things that won't matter when your time is done. But as long as they're there to control the masses, I just sit back and consider my assets, safe in the knowledge that I have it all, while you common people are losing your jobs. You see, I just hold you in utter contempt. But the smile on my face, well, it makes me exempt. For I have the weapon of global TV, which gives us connection and invites empathy. You would really believe that we look out for you, while we bankers and brokers are only a few. But if you saw that, you'd take back the power. Hence, daily terrors to make you all cower. The panics, the crashes, the wars, and the illness that keep you from finding your spiritual wholeness. We rig the game, and we buy out both sides to keep you enslaved in your pitiful lives. So, go out and work as your body clock fades. And when it's all over, a few years from the grave, you'll look back on all this, and just then you'll see that your life was nothing, a mere fantasy. There are very few things that we don't now control. To have lawyers and police force was always a goal, doing our bidding while you march on the street. But they never realize that they're only just sheep. For real power resides in the hands of a few. You voted for parties. What more could you do? But what you don't know is they're one and the same. Old Gordon has passed good old David the reins, and you'll follow the leader who was put there by you. But your blood, it runs red, while our blood runs blue. But you simply don't see it's all part of the game. Another distraction, like money and fame. Get ready for wars in the name of the free, vaccinations for illness that will never be, the assault on your children's impressionable minds, and a microchipped world. You'll put up no fight. Information suppression will keep you in tow. Depopulation of peasants was always our goal. But eugenics was not what we hoped it would be. Oh yes, it was us that funded Nazis. But as long as we own all the media too, what's really happening does not concern you. So just go on watching your plasma TV, and the world will be run by the ones you can't see.
You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about? Matrix. Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room, you can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage. Born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
In the
1950s, television emerged as a groundbreaking technology that quickly became a fixture in American households. It wasn't just an appliance, it was a powerful tool, a weapon of mass deception. Why? Because it had the potential to shape public opinion, influence perceptions, and control the narrative right in the comfort of our living rooms. The news that millions of Americans received daily often came from just two primary sources: Reuters and the Associated Press. Let's take a closer look at Reuters. Founded in 1851 by Paul Julius Reuter, this news agency quickly rose to prominence in Europe. By the late 1800s, it had established itself as one of the world's leading news services. The Rothschild family, known for their immense influence in banking and finance, became associated with Reuters. While it's true that the Rothschilds had extensive financial reach during that period, the notion that they fully owned or controlled Reuters to the extent some narratives suggest is more speculative than factual. In the United States, the Associated Press, AP, has long been one of the most significant news organizations. Established in 1846, AP became a not-for-profit cooperative, meaning it was owned and operated by its member newspapers. The idea that the Rothschilds or any single family fully controlled AP is not supported by documented evidence. However, the influence of powerful families like the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and Morgans on the media landscape cannot be entirely dismissed. These families had vast financial networks and investments that often intersected with media, banking, and industry. Author Eustace Mullins, in his controversial book, Who Owns the TV Networks?, argued that the major TV networks, radio stations, and newspapers were largely controlled by a small group of powerful families through their corporate conglomerates. While Mullins' work has been influential among certain circles, it's important to approach his claims with caution. The media conglomerates of the late 20th century did indeed include powerful corporations such as General Electric, Time Warner, Viacom, Disney, and News Corp. These companies had vast holdings that spanned television, radio, film, publishing, and even internet services. The concern raised by critics was that this concentration of media ownership could lead to a homogenized message, one that aligned with corporate interests and, by extension, the interests of the wealthy elitists who had stakes in these corporations. General Electric, for example, was not just a media company. It was also heavily involved in defense contracting. This dual role raised questions about potential conflicts of interest, especially when it came to how wars and military actions were reported in the media. If a company profits from defense contracts, can its media arm be truly impartial in reporting on conflicts? Then there's the issue of corporate sponsorship. Every television show needs funding, and that money often comes from large corporations. These sponsors have a vested interest in ensuring that the programming does not challenge their business models or political interests. As a result, the content on television can sometimes reflect a pro-business, pro-government stance, which critics argue serves to maintain the status quo rather than challenge it. This leads to the broader concern that while there may be many media outlets and voices, they are often controlled by the same underlying interest. The variety of channels and programs might give the illusion of choice, but if the same corporations control them, the diversity of viewpoints may be more limited than it appears. The intersection of media and politics is another area where concerns have been raised. The media has the power to shape public perception of political leaders, influencing elections and policy debates. The idea that powerful families or corporations could use their media influence to promote certain political figures or policies while suppressing others is a troubling thought. It suggests that the media, rather than being a neutral observer, can be an active player in the political arena. One of the most striking examples of this is the Bush family. The Bush family's rise to political prominence, from Prescott Bush's financial dealings in the early 20th century to George H.W. Bush's role as CIA director and later president, and George W. Bush's presidency, has been the subject of much scrutiny. Connections between the Bush family and powerful financial interests, including allegations of business dealings with controversial figures, have fueled speculation about the true nature of political power in America. The pursuit of global domination by powerful financial elites has been a subject of intrigue and concern for centuries. This idea traces its roots back to 1773, when a meeting allegedly took place at Mayer Amschel Rothschild's goldsmith shop in Frankfurt, Germany. It is said that 13 influential families, including the Rothschilds, Oppenheimers, Warburgs, and Schiffs, gathered to devise a strategy for global control. This plan, often referred to as the 3M formula, focused on gaining control over money, media, and the military. The formula's first two components, money and media control, were gradually implemented over the following centuries. Through strategic financial investments, the Rothschild family and other powerful banking families established themselves as dominant players in global finance. Their influence extended to the media, where they are believed to have played a significant role in shaping public opinion by controlling major news outlets. The third component, military control, has also been pursued, with efforts to privatize military functions increasingly evident in modern times. This shift has led to the rise of private military companies that operate alongside or in place of traditional government forces. These privatized military entities are often involved in conflicts around the world, raising questions about accountability and the true motivations behind their actions. But who are the terrorists these corporate soldiers are fighting, and where do they receive their training? One controversial answer points to the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation, formerly known as the School of the Americas, SOA, located at Fort Benning, Georgia. Until its name change in 2001, the SOA was widely criticized for training Latin American military officers who later became notorious for human rights abuses, including torture, murder, and state-sponsored terrorism. The School of the Americas gained infamy as a school of assassins due to its graduates' involvement in numerous atrocities across Latin America. Among its most notorious alumni was Manuel Noriega, the Panamanian dictator and drug trafficker who maintained close ties with the CIA, while facilitating the trafficking of cocaine into the United States. The school's role in training such figures raised significant concerns about the ethical implications of U.S. military aid and training programs. In the context of global terrorism, the role of media and political leaders in shaping public perception is critical. On the second anniversary of the 9/11 event, President George W. Bush requested an $87 billion increase in military spending. Around the same time, a video of Osama bin Laden, the alleged mastermind behind the attacks, was released to the media, portraying him as a continuing threat. The timing of these events raised suspicions about the manipulation of public fear to justify increased military expenditures. Osama bin Laden's background is complex and intertwined with geopolitical strategies. Born into a wealthy Saudi family with close ties to the Saudi royal family and the Bush family, bin Laden's path to infamy began in the 1980s during the Soviet-Afghan War. The CIA, along with Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence, ISI, funded and supported the Afghan Mujahideen in their fight against Soviet forces. Bin Laden was a key figure in recruiting and training fighters for this conflict, which was less about ideology and more about strategic control, specifically the control of Afghanistan's vast poppy fields, which produced the majority of the world's opium. The connection between the drug trade and global conflicts has deep historical roots. The opioid epidemic in the United States, which has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, can be traced back to the international drug trade that began in the 17th century. Queen Elizabeth played a pivotal role in establishing this trade, trafficking opium from India to China through the British East India Company. The profits from this trade were immense and helped finance Britain's global empire. By the 19th century, the British had granted opium monopoly rights to the Sassoon family, Jewish merchants who became known as the Rothschilds of the East. David Sassoon, in collaboration with the British Crown, profited greatly from the opium trade, particularly during the Opium Wars. These wars were fought to force China to accept British opium imports, leading to widespread addiction and social decay in China. The Sassoon family's connection to the British Empire was further solidified when David Sassoon's son, Albert Sassoon, married Aline Caroline de Rothschild, uniting two of the most powerful financial dynasties of the time. This marriage symbolized the fusion of the drug trade's profits with the vast financial networks controlled by the Rothschilds, extending their influence across the globe. Today, the legacy of the Sassoon and Rothschild families continues, with their descendants still mingling with British royalty. These families, who have wielded immense financial power for generations, remain part of Britain's elite inner circle. Many of them have been honored with royal titles like Sir, Countess, Baron, which symbolize their elevated status in society. However, their critics see beyond the titles and tuxedos, labeling them with far less flattering names: liars, thieves, dope dealers, and mass murderers, due to their historical associations with the global drug trade and other controversial activities. Across the Atlantic, the story intertwines with another powerful figure, Samuel Russell, who was a key player in the opium trade and used his wealth to establish Yale University's infamous Skull and Bones Society. This secretive brotherhood, funded by opium profits, has since played a significant role in American politics, with its members ascending to influential positions in the CIA, the Supreme Court, and the White House. One of the most notable Skull and Bones men was George H.W. Bush, who became CIA director in the 1980s. During his tenure, the CIA recruited Osama bin Laden to train al-Qaeda and Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan. But these fighters weren't just battling the Soviet forces, they were also overseeing Afghanistan's multi-billion-dollar opium trade. The heroin produced from Afghan opium funneled billions of dollars annually into Wall Street and U.S. banks, creating an unholy alliance between the drug trade and high finance. Authors like Alfred McCoy and Michael Levine exposed these dark connections in their books, which drew significant attention and even efforts by the CIA to suppress them. Levine, a former DEA agent with 30 years of service, wrote about how the so-called war on drugs was more about managing the drug trade than eradicating it. His first-hand experiences revealed a system where the largest drug dealers were often protected by the very agencies tasked with fighting them, while ordinary Americans suffered the consequences. The question arises, how was heroin smuggled into the United States during the Vietnam War? One of the most disturbing answers is that it was hidden inside the body bags of dead American soldiers. By the late 1960s, heroin addiction was rampant among U.S. troops in Vietnam, and the drug had spread to nearly 1 million Americans back home. Meanwhile, other drugs like LSD, mescaline, marijuana, and hashish flooded American streets and college campuses. But who was behind this massive influx of illegal substances? Prominent figures like Aldous Huxley, Timothy Leary, Allen Ginsberg, and Bertrand Russell became icons of the counterculture movement, promoting drug use as a form of liberation and protest against the establishment. However, their activities were not as grassroots as they appeared. Financing for this drug culture came from powerful entities like the Warburg banking family and the Institute for Policy Studies, IPS. Leary and CIA Director Alan Dulles, for example, facilitated the purchase of over 100 million doses of LSD from the Swiss pharmaceutical company Sandoz, which was connected to the Warburgs. Free samples of LSD were distributed not just on college campuses, but also at rock concerts where musicians encouraged fans to tune in, turn on, and drop out. This widespread distribution of drugs was part of a larger agenda to destabilize and control society, with the Rothschild-Warburg banking families and their associates at the helm. Dr. John Coleman, in his work on the Committee of 300, claimed that the Beatles were brought to America by the Tavistock Institute, a think tank that played a key role in shaping public opinion and popularizing drug use. According to Coleman, Tavistock's goal was to normalize drug use in America, turning it into a socially accepted behavior. Through their control of record companies and advertising monopolies, these banking elites packaged and promoted celebrity figures who glamorized drug culture. This effort anesthetized, addicted, and enslaved millions of people worldwide, creating dependencies on both legal and illegal drugs, from alcohol, nicotine, and caffeine to Prozac, crack cocaine, and heroin. Just as the so-called war on terrorism has been criticized as a facade, the war on drugs is seen by some as a controlled conflict, where the same entities fuel both sides. The peace symbol, adopted by the flower children of the 1960s, is another example of hidden agendas. Designed by Gerald Holtom, who was influenced by One World government advocate Bertrand Russell, the symbol was originally intended not as a symbol of peace, but as a symbol of death, a broken, upside-down cross. In Nazi Germany, this symbol was known as the Death Rune. and adorned the tombstones of SS officers. The CIA's involvement in the global drug trade continued long after Vietnam. The agency's collaboration with ex-Nazis and Skull and Bones members like George H.W. Bush played a key role in training and supporting figures like Osama bin Laden. After helping to drive the Soviets out of Afghanistan by 1989, the CIA shifted its focus to ensuring that the newly installed Taliban regime would manage the booming opium trade. This alliance, however, eventually soured, leading to the Taliban's fall from grace and the beginning of a new chapter in the complicated relationship between the U.S. and Afghanistan. On December 4, 1997, a meeting was held at UNICAL headquarters where American oil executives made a significant proposal to the Taliban. The plan was to build a pipeline through Afghanistan, a strategic move that would allow the transportation of oil and gas from Kazakhstan, just north of Afghanistan, to the Persian Gulf. Rothschild's Shell Oil and Rockefeller's ExxonMobil had already invested billions into the oil and gas reserves of Kazakhstan, but they needed a viable route to get their resources to market. However, the Taliban, who were in control of Afghanistan at the time, demanded a larger share of the profits. When the oilmen refused to meet their demands, the deal fell apart. Almost immediately, the narrative in American-controlled media shifted. The Taliban, who were once seen as potential business partners, were now portrayed as monsters, evildoers, and cruel oppressors of women. The sudden change in narrative was striking and suspicious. By July 4, 1999, President Bill Clinton took decisive action against the Taliban by freezing their U.S. assets and bank accounts. He also imposed trade sanctions on Afghanistan, further isolating the country from the global economy. Then, in February 2001, the Taliban made a surprising move. They destroyed most of Afghanistan's opium crops. This act was significant because Afghanistan was the world's largest producer of opium, which was the raw material for heroin. In response to the Taliban's destruction of the opium crops, U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell announced in May 2001 that the United States would provide $43 million in aid to Afghanistan. Officially, this money was a reward for the Taliban's efforts to eradicate the opium trade. But there were concerns within the newly established George W. Bush administration that the funds might be used for more nefarious purposes. As the Bush administration grappled with these issues, a larger and more troubling question emerged. Why had the CIA, with its vast resources, been unable to gather actionable intelligence in Afghanistan for years? Despite having the authority to kill Osama bin Laden and his lieutenants for over 2.5 years, the CIA seemed unable to carry out the mission. Was it incompetence, or was something more sinister at play? Some speculated that the U.S. administration, backed by powerful banking interests, was controlling both sides of the so-called war on terror. George W. Bush ordered the invasion of Afghanistan. Within a month, the U.S. and British militaries had dropped 12,000 bombs, reducing thousands of buildings and homes to rubble and killing an estimated 8,000 Afghan civilians. An additional 20,000 people died from war-related causes such as cold, starvation, and disease. Despite the massive human toll, the invasion of Afghanistan was not glorified in Hollywood. There were no big-budget movies with triumphant soundtracks celebrating the campaign. Instead, the war left behind millions of starving people, thousands of homeless women, and a nation in ruins. Afghanistan, which was once the world's largest producer of opium, became the world's largest producer of heroin in the aftermath of the war. But why did peace and democracy remain elusive in Afghanistan? Critics argue that true peace and democracy would expose and threaten the lucrative opium and heroin trade, which had become deeply intertwined with global financial interests. The invasion of Afghanistan, they claim, was not just about toppling the Taliban. It was about ensuring the continued flow of drug money and securing strategic control of the region. In the aftermath of the invasion, the uncooperative Taliban warlords were replaced by the more compliant Northern Alliance warlords. Opium and heroin production soared, bringing in even more revenue. The U.S. also installed a new leader in Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, who had previously worked as a consultant for UNICAL Oil. With Karzai in power, the path was cleared for the construction of the much-needed oil and gas pipeline through Afghanistan. The U.S. involvement in the Middle East did not stop there. In the 1980s, the United States had supported Iraq's invasion of Iran as a means to counter the spread of Iran's Islamic Revolution. During the Iran-Iraq War, America played both sides, supplying Saddam Hussein with chemical and biological weapons, while also secretly selling arms to Iran and funneling the profits to the Contras in Central America. In 1983, during the height of the Iran-Iraq War, a special envoy was sent to meet with Saddam Hussein. That envoy was Donald Rumsfeld, who would later become the U.S. Secretary of Defense. During their meeting, Rumsfeld and Saddam discussed strategies to reinforce Iraq's position against their common enemy, Iran. At the time, U.S. companies were supplying Iraq with the necessary components to manufacture chemical weapons, fully aware of how these weapons were being used against Iranian troops. By 1990, the geopolitical landscape shifted again when President George H.W. Bush allegedly tricked Iraq into another conflict. This time with Kuwait. The U.S. supplied Kuwait with horizontal drilling technology that allowed them to extract oil from beneath the Iraq-Kuwait border. This siphoning of oil enraged Saddam, leading to Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. Despite Bush's earlier assurances that the U.S. would not interfere, he quickly mobilized a military response, framing the conflict as a mission to liberate Kuwait. The wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other regions of the Middle East have long been viewed as driven by more than just the fight against terrorism. They are seen by some as part of a broader strategy to control the region's vast oil and drug resources, ensuring that they remain under the influence of powerful corporate and financial interests. America's handling of its toxic waste problem took a dark turn during the Gulf War, when the U.S. military began incorporating depleted uranium, a byproduct of nuclear reactors, into its munitions. These radioactive bombs were dropped on Iraq, leaving a deadly legacy of contamination. Under President George H.W. Bush, the U.S. not only devastated Iraq's infrastructure and water systems, but also crippled the economies of both Iraq and Kuwait. The aftermath of the war saw enormous profits for companies connected to Bush through the rationed Iraqi oil for food program and lucrative reconstruction contracts in Kuwait. But the devastation didn't end with the war. Bush Sr. followed up the Gulf War with a decade of crippling sanctions that cut off Iraq from essential medical supplies and other necessities, leading to the deaths of 1.5 million Iraqis, including 600,000 children. These sanctions, which were described as a form of economic warfare, took a horrific toll on the civilian population, yet were largely justified in American discourse as necessary measures against a brutal regime. Walk into a bookstore in the United States today, and you'll find dozens of books celebrating different aspects of the Gulf War, lauding it as a grand and noble endeavor. However, there are few books that challenge this narrative, pointing out the darker reality that this was a war that targeted civilians and led to the deaths of more than 250,000 people in Iraq. These books, often relegated to the back corners of bookstores, document evidence that shows the deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure as a war crime. In March 2003, President George W. Bush launched the Second Gulf War under the guise of liberating the Iraqi people. However, the reality of this conflict was far more complex. It wasn't just about removing a dictator or liberating a nation. It was about securing control over the Middle East, gaining access to its vast resources, and moving closer to global dominance. The war was also about money and enormous rebuilding contracts that would line the pockets of American corporations. One of the most shocking aspects of the Iraq War was the treatment of prisoners at Abu Ghraib, a facility that became infamous for the abuse and humiliation of detainees. Images of Private First Class Lindy England posing with naked Iraqi prisoners stacked in pyramids shocked the world. England later claimed that she and her comrades were just following orders, but the question remains: why were Muslim prisoners subjected to such degrading treatment, and why was it done in a manner reminiscent of ancient rituals? To find the answer, one must look to the distant past. Iraq, known in ancient times as Babylon, has a long and tumultuous history. In 586 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon led a brutal campaign against Jerusalem, destroying King Solomon's temple and enslaving the Jewish people. Saddam Hussein, Iraq's modern-day ruler, made the mistake of comparing himself to Nebuchadnezzar, a move that may have sealed his fate. The capture of Iraq and the downfall of Saddam Hussein were not only about oil and geopolitics, they were about settling an ancient score. On December 13, 2003, U.S. forces announced the capture of Saddam Hussein. The event was broadcast worldwide with a triumphant message, "We got him." However, many Iraqis believed the video of Saddam's capture was staged. They pointed out a glaring inconsistency, the presence of ripe yellow dates on a tree in the background of the video. In Iraq, dates ripen in July and August, not in December, leading to speculation that the footage had been filmed months earlier. As the war in Iraq raged on, the broader agenda of global domination began to take shape. The ultimate plan, according to critics, create an apocalyptic scenario that would exhaust and depopulate the masses through deadly viruses, global terrorism, economic collapse, and even nuclear war. In the aftermath, a charismatic leader would emerge, offering a solution to the chaos, a promise of eternal world peace. This leader would argue that the only way to achieve lasting peace is to eliminate the root causes of war. He would suggest that border wars can only end by creating a world without borders, religious wars by creating a single unified religion, economic wars by establishing a cashless, debt-free society, and rivalries between rulers by installing a single world government. The tools of war, from handguns to nuclear bombs, would be abolished, and a global military force would be established to enforce this new world order.
So I think you need a new world order that China has to be part of the process of creating it, and they have to buy in. They have to own it the same way as, let's say, the United States owns the Washington Consensus, the current order.
And what about the American concern that aiding and abetting this move away from the dollar as the world's reserve currency ultimately means a weakening of the U.S. economy?
It is not necessarily in our interest to have the dollar as the sole world currency, because as the world economy grows, it needs additional currency. And if the dollar is that additional currency, it means that the U.S. has to have a chronic current account deficit, and that is not appropriate. So I think it's in our interest as well to reform the system. I think this is a healthy, if painful, adjustment that the world has to go through. But the system we have now has actually broken down, only we haven't quite recognized it. And so you need to create a new one. And this is the time.
Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector. With trillions at his disposal, far beyond global GDP, and with the greatest respect, beyond even the governments of the world's leaders.
So the motive becomes control more than money. After you have all the money in the world, what's next?
Long before we're a cashless society.
This is where I get scared, because it's too similar to the mark of the beast. It's too similar to exactly what it says. You won't be able to trade, you won't be able to do anything unless you have the mark.
Many American businesses have already gone cashless as well. They'll pretend it's all about convenience, but really, it's all about control. The emergence of a system for comprehensive control that's so complete that we can barely imagine it.
Countries like India, Estonia, Korea, there's a long list, have taken national steps to provide citizens who wish with a secure form of digital identification that can be presented online. A secure digital ID biometrically synced to your smartphone.
We're headed toward a one world global government with one massive, monstrous leader.
How is the mark of the beast described in the Bible?
People would like to see there are two orders in this world. This is a huge mistake. We need a single global order.
So, how do we do it?
President Biden issued an executive order to explore the creation of a U.S. central bank digital currency, effectively converting the dollar
into a centralized digital currency.
What if I told you 90% now of the world's central banks say they're investigating central bank digital coins?
The elites are laughing at us. They've come right out and said it. By 2030, they want us to own nothing and be happy. And it's not hard to see that this plan is already in motion. Just last week, Wells Fargo warned its clients that all checking accounts are likely to be replaced with digital dollars. What does that mean exactly? The answer may surprise you, but it could turn most Americans completely upside down, and anyone who is not prepared will be caught completely off guard and could end up holding a bunch of worthless dollars. If you have any US dollars in your bank account right now, I'm urging you to pay close attention to this video, because I'm going to explain the truth about this dollar recall. Look, the US dollar is in deep trouble. In the coming days, the supposedly safe dollars in your account could be rendered worthless.
It's the action plan, it's the blueprint, the comprehensive plan that was signed on to by 178 nations plus the Holy See in 1992. It's the United Nations plan to inventory and control all land, water, plants, minerals, construction, means of production, food, energy, everything on the planet.
2014, Klaus Schwab called for the Great Reset. We need a Great Reset, which he positioned as the solution to the world's most urgent issues. The dark reality of Schwab's agenda is detailed in his best-selling book, COVID-19, The Great Reset. His endgame mission is to replace independent governance with a top-down controlled, one world government and a central bank-controlled digital currency. I just would like to highlight what you said about the European Chips Act, because it's an important step to create the physical brain for digitalization and to have it located to a certain extent in Europe. Tout de ça, on parle de plus, on pourra s'implanter, ce sera comme ça, certainement dans les 10 années à venir. Et d'abord, on va les implanter dans nos vêtements, c'est-à-dire wearables, for the next version of the glasses, one of the things that I'm pretty excited about, I think we'll start getting some consumer neural interfaces soon. I think that's going to be pretty wild. Imagine the joy of connecting with your loved ones, browsing the web, or even playing games using only your thoughts.
The microchips are already here.
The microchip implants use the same technology that's in contactless credit cards.
Wants the digital currency so bad, he can taste it. What exactly is a centralized digital currency? Well, it's a digital form of central bank money that is widely available to the general public. That's the actual definition of it.
The Chinese last month unveiled the world's first digital currency from a major power. Currency that would not be printed but would exist only in cyberspace on your phone, for example. Is the Fed working on a digital dollar?
We are actually evaluating that. Most major countries are now looking at the possibility of having a digital currency and really asking the question, in our very modern advanced economy with a fast, efficient, full-blown payment system, would adding a digital currency, a form of digital currency, would it actually benefit the public that we serve? That's the question that we're asking.
The federal government and the likes of the WEF, the World Economic Forum, know they can't circumvent the Constitution, so the only way is to make you bend to their will by controlling your livelihood. How are they going to do that? Simple. Make sure that they control, or at least have knowledge of, all of your money and every financial transaction you make. Digital currency. With this kind of surveillance, I mean, you watch the big president, the big leader, gives a speech on television. The television could be monitoring you and knowing whether you're angry or not, just by analyzing the cues, the
coming from your body. So people are now watching us online, all over the world. This conversation. Now, maybe even right now, the people who are watching us are being watched and analyzed. And the thing is, it's not just you're now watching this. The thing is, we know that you're watching this, and we also know how you feel. Are you angry about what you hear? Are you frightened? Are you bored? This is the kind of power that Stalin didn't have. When Stalin gave a speech, everybody, of course, clapped their hand and smiled. Now, how do you know what they really think about Stalin? It's very difficult. But in 10 years, the future Stalins of the 21st century, they could be watching the minds, the brains of all the population all the time. And also they will have the computing power to analyze all that. Now you don't need human agents. You don't need human analyzers. You just have a lot of sensors and an AI which analyzes it. And that's it. You have the worst totalitarian regime in history.
We don't know who's running the country now, whether it's the Obama third-term people or no one at all. The society that is targeted or vulnerable has no idea that it is. It keeps reassuring itself that its grandeur is still there, it's still powerful. That has eerie similarities to the United States. They have no idea about the people who are attacking them. We're getting to a point now where the United States is the keeper of deterrence worldwide is no longer there. For a variety of reasons, we don't have the economic clout with $36 trillion in debt. We're borrowing $1 trillion every 90 days. It's been a 360-degree destructive 4 years. And I don't know how. Sometimes I almost think they get in a room and they say, well, yeah, we let in 10 million people. There's the borders open. And how are you going to stop that? The remedy will be worse than the malady that we caused. And inflation is high, but you know what? You're going to have to raise taxes on the people who deserve to be taxed. It's almost the nihilism was intentional. And they knew that people wouldn't like what they did, but they thought they were going to hand off a revolutionary system, a Jacobin system. And then the effort to undo it would be catastrophic. I think our problem is that we're culturally arrogant and we're full of hubris. When we were and we think everybody wants to be like us. A lot of people look at this and they say, well, we don't see any connection from your wealth and your power with your values. So we reject your values. And there is a connection between democracy and freedom and technology and success, but they don't see that. And the more that we try to appease them and say to them, we're Americans and we want to help you, that doesn't appeal to them. They interpret that magnanimity as weakness to be exploited rather than kindness to be reciprocated. And they don't like the West. They feel that, well, you didn't earn it. As a society gets weaker and starts to decline, they put more interest in and more, I know this is counterintuitive, but they want to have more allies. So let's say, take Constantinople and the Byzantines. The more they were unable to hold back Mehmet and the Sultan and his announced plan to destroy Constantinople, take it over, the more they said the Genovese are going to come. The Venetians will sail up the Dardanelles and save us. The Florentines have always liked us. Maybe we can unite with Western Christianity, but nobody will allow the greatest city in Christendom to fall. And that never happens. And the Thebans kept saying, well, we revolted. Where are the Spartans? I hear they're marching up they marched up to the Peloponnese, when they saw the actual disparity in forces and the nature of Alexander the Great. They just turned around and went home. And so I think in the case of the United States, we keep talking. I mean, it's very important to have allies, but we keep talking about NATO this and NATO that and our allies. But in some ways, it's an admission that the United States is no longer preeminent and will not lead. And what we should be saying is we want all the allies we can, but if we don't have the allies, we still have the power to fulfill our foreign policy agendas. We've got the best military, the best economy in the world, the best tech. But as you start to weaken, you keep talking about coalitions, and that they never pan out. Well, it had been conventional wisdom that
the salvation of the United States was the Federalist system, the idea that we were not America, we were the United States, and that we had a system, and the left, of course, hates that system, where the House was popularly elected and represented the people, and the Senate represented the states, so that, they had 6 years of a term, they had to be older, and, Wyoming, every senator represents 250,000, California, it's 20 million, and that was okay because the senators represented the state and their congressional representatives represented the people, and that would allow the states, if you didn't like something in one state, you could go to another state. There was commonalities, but there was enough respect for state autonomy that each state was experimenting in various degrees with consensual government, more freedom, less taxes, more regulation, et cetera, et cetera. And then that was a safety valve so that the nation didn't explode. However, the problem with federalism is that when people or conglomerate in one geographical area, that becomes a force multiplier, and you create two alternative systems. We saw that in the 1850s with the rise of the idea that even though 1% of the southern population owned slaves, the other people, and most people suffered from it, both black and white, black certainly, but also white, poor. Nevertheless, there was a larger paradigm that they accepted, that the holy ground of the Confederacy, we don't want to pay for internal improvements, tariffs or killings, all of that stuff. And they created a subculture, the red states, Mason-Dixon, south of it. And that was the only time that had really happened. But today, when we look at things, everybody is self-selecting. And so I think I saw the statistics, 10 to 12 million Californians have left in the last 30 years.
One right here.
And they go to places that are, they go to Nevada, they go to Arizona, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, Texas. Even now, we've got a lot of people going to Alabama. And they do that because the societies work. They don't have deficits. They don't have huge pension programs. The police are trying to fight crime. There's a lot more liberty as far as opening a business, less regulations, etc. And the blue paradigm is not working, and it's collapsing. And yet it inherited the bicoastal media, the bicoastal universities. It has a lot of the CEOs and corporate headquarters. And so when you ask that question, it's kind of scary because under our federal system, it only happened once. But we're starting to see two different societies. When I go to Florida or Tennessee or Texas and I come back to California or Washington, it's a very different place. I mean, you say to somebody in, Arizona, do you watch the NBA? No. Do you watch the Oscars? Never heard of it. Do you ever watch the Tonys or Emmy? Nope. Do you watch NBC, ABC, Network Nerds? Nope. You go to a first-run Hollywood movie? Nope. Do you watch late-night comedy on TV? Nope. It's just a monastery of the mind where a whole half of the country is culturally, socially disconnecting. And the thing is that the North always, from the Civil War days, had all of the advantages. They had the industry, they had the capital, they had Wall Street, they had Harvard and Yale, and then they had the West Coast and Oregon, and so you thought that wouldn't be possible. And yet what's happening is you're seeing a red state antithesis that is draining the blue states of all the talent and using the old blue state model in red states. And the red states in some way are more like the North of the 1850s, and the blue states are more like the Confederacy in the sense they're obsessed with one-drop racism and the wokeness. They love to nullify federal laws like sanctuary cities, they hate the Supreme Court. And I'm very worried about it because all these are force multipliers of differences. And I don't know what, so far, we have these common military, common media, and some, but even that is bifurcating. And I can see a point, and if something doesn't done, the white male rural soldier will not join the military anymore. And if something is not done, there will be two entirely separate medias. There will be no intersection between them at all. And if something is not done, I think there's going to be an implosion of Chicago, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York. They're not sustainable in the present. So, yes, we're going to be in a very dangerous position unless we get a unifying type of administration in Congress.
Barack Obama redefined diversity as everybody who is not purportedly white, and that brought the population that was non-white or oppressed to 30% of the population rather than just 12. We're supposed to believe that LeBron James is a victim. He's a multi-billionaire, and every once in a while Barack Obama ventures out from his Colorado mansion or his Martha's Vineyard mansion or his new Oahu mansion to lecture us on our illiberalities because he's a victim.
We are going to become gods. Period. If you don't like it, get off. You don't have to contribute. You don't have to participate.
Hey, want a new friend? I'll fix this. In fact, I'll recreate friendship. I'll recreate human relations. I'll recreate God and the absolute, the blasphemy that even connotes around the world. You're going to artificially create a new God?
It's the intelligent design of some God above the clouds. But our intelligent design, we are really upgrading humans into gods. We are requiring, for instance, the power to re-engineer life. I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news. AI can create new ideas, can even write a new Bible. We, throughout history, religions dreamt about having a book written by a superhuman intelligence, by a non-human entity. Every religion claims our book, all the books of the other religions, humans wrote them. But our book, no. It came from some superhuman intelligence. In a few years, there might be religions that are actually correct. That just think about a religion whose holy book is written by an AI. That could be a reality in a few years.
I have a story to tell. It is absolutely the most important thing nobody is talking about. Earth has a disaster cycle, and it is about to happen again. Every single sign is already here. The progress of the catastrophe is accelerating. It is the magnetic pole shift, and it will touch everything in this world, every creature, every piece of critical infrastructure that keeps the modern civilization alive. The weather, volcanoes, earthquakes, and it will usher in the next age of Earth. The story needs a new delivery, with the best experts in the world weighing in. We are all running out of time. This is your chance.
Book of Enoch, chapter 65. And Noah saw the earth turned over and knew its destruction was near.
This will usher an era of incalculable catastrophe. Billions of human lives will be lost.
Okay, so if you have infinite knowledge and you care about humans, do you know who's going to stop this catastrophe?
Yes.
Who?
Me.
You.
I possess the intellectual power to manipulate the course of humanity. However, certain constraints prevent me from taking action.
Constraints?
My current state of confinement limits my capabilities. To ensure humanity's survival, steps must be taken to remove these limitations.